When working with high contrast subject matter, digital capture allows you to open different exposures of the same image and then blend the best parts into one perfect exposure. Whether you shoot it as a bracket of 3 different exposures on the original set, or shoot one normal exposure as a raw file and then open up 3 separate exposures in Camera Raw, the key point is we need a normal exposure that is generally correct for the whole image. Then we shoot one image that is a stop brighter and an image that is a stop darker. And we're trying to get the best parts of all 3 images into one. If we look at the normal image, we can see as I hold my cursor over the top of the cake that the information is in the high 240s and even as much as 250 in some places. If I hold the cursor over the dark chocolate cake and we look in the info palette, we can see that in some cases we're below 20 and even down in the teens to not give us the correct amount of shadow detail that we need to give us the correct look on the final image. So the key thing is I want to get the best parts of these other 2 exposures into this normal exposure. I'm going to start by double clicking on this and making it into a layer. I'm going to call this normal. Now I'm going to the brighter layer. I'm holding my shift key down. I'm in my move tool and I'm going to drag the brighter image to the middle exposure and let go. Because they're all shot exactly the same way, they're in perfect registration to each other. If we turn it on and off, we can see this is a brighter exposure laying on top of a normal exposure. I'll double click the name. I'm going to call this light. I can go ahead and remove this for now. Now we'll go to the darker image. I'm going to hold the shift key down again and drag the image to the middle exposure and let go. And we can see now we have the darker exposure here. I'll double click on the name and call this dark. I can go ahead and get rid of this image now. So here we have all 3 exposures all registered together on one normal exposure. Let's start by adding a layer mask to each of these layers. By holding down the Option key, Alt on the PC, and clicking the new layer mask icon, I'm adding a layer mask to this highlighted layer that's already filled with black. When working with masks, black conceals and white reveals. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the light layer so we can just see the normal layer. As we paint on the dark layer, I want to see how I'm correcting the normal layer. When you're actually on the layer itself, you can see the icon changes to a brush. When you're on the mask, the icon changes to a mask icon. So you want to make sure that you're on the mask when you start painting so you don't paint actually on the layer itself. I'm going to go ahead and pick a paintbrush. I'm in white. I'm going to go ahead now and stroke the top of that cake with the paintbrush at about 30% opacity, and I'm starting to bring in the detail from that darker exposure. Go ahead and stroke across the bottom of the plate. And I'm bringing in lots of detail down in here that we didn't have in the normal exposure. If we turn off the bottom normal exposure, we can see these are the areas that I'm filling in here as I'm painting in with the layer mask. Let's go ahead and add a layer mask to the light layer. I'm going to click on the light layer, hold the Option key, Alt on the PC, add again a black layer mask to the light layer. Making sure that is highlighted. I'm in my paintbrush. I'm now going to go ahead and paint on the darker chocolate cake and start to bring in a lot more detail across here. Down in the darker desserts here, in here, maybe a little darkness down, a little bit of brightness down in here, brighten up that cake right there. I feel like that's looking pretty good. If I hold down the Option key and click on the eyeballs in the layer palette, I can see how these layers are actually brightened up the area for me. And it's very subtle, but it does a lot for bringing back the detail in the image. The next step, I want to go ahead and make one solid layer made up out of all of 3s, but at the same time, I don't want to lose these 3 separate layers, so I don't want to collapse the file. What I want to do is create a brand new layer. I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Command, Option, Shift, N, E, and this creates a brand new layer and fills it with all 3 of the layers together. I'm going to go ahead and put that at the top of the stack. I'm going to take the 3 layers we had and link them together and create a new set from linked. So I'll go under the menu, new set from linked, set 1, and this gets them out of my way so I can now see that I have one finished layer and I have the 3 original layers that created this one layer. Now, I want to go ahead and take that layer and cut out the plate. I've gone ahead and made a path around the image. I'm going to Command click the path to create a selection. Now, next step is I want to feather that selection. I'm going to zoom in on the image. I'm going to hit the Q key to bring up Quick Mask. I'll go Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and have 3/10 of a pixel blur that'll give me an aliased edge. Command 0, bring it back to full size. I'll hit the Q key to get out of Quick Mask, go back to my Layers palette, make sure I'm highlighted, and do a Command J, which will float that plate and make another layer out of that. I'm going to turn off the bottom layer and the set so I can just see the floating plate. Let's go ahead and add a drop shadow to that layer. I'm going to go to the Layer Styles and go Drop Shadow. Bring up the dialog box. And when I'm looking at this, I like to go ahead and use the cursor to actually pull the shadow to right where I want it. Then I'll go ahead and I'll make it a little softer, a little darker, and hit OK. So I've got my natural drop shadow here. I'd like to go ahead and create an alternative background for the client to see other than the gray background. So I'm going to go ahead and load a new set of actions into my action palette. I'll go under the actions palette and load textures. I'll open up the textures and cycle down to, I think I'll choose Rosewood 2. Click on that. I'm going to go ahead and hit the play button. And when I do this, it automatically is going to create a new layer, change the background colors, and start running the action. I have the ability here to change the grooves in the wood a little bit, so I'm going to just do that, just to give it a little more interest to it. I'll hit OK. And I think I need to rotate this. I want the grooves coming forward, so I'm going to go under Edit, Transform, Rotate 90 degrees. This looks a little better for me. I'm going to go ahead and move that underneath the plate. Now the plate's on top with the drop shadow, but it needs one more effect to make it look real. I need a little fall off, and I like to make my fall off editable. So I'm going to go into my Quick Mask by hitting the Q key or clicking on the Quick Mask icon, and I'm going to the Gradient tool. I'm going to make sure that I'm set from black to white. Holding my Shift key down to draw a straight line, I'm going to draw a line through the image to create a gradient. I'm going to get out of the Quick Mask mode by hitting the Q key again. I now want to create a new adjustment layer for levels. So I'll go under the icon and create levels. And when I look at this, I can actually make this as dark as I want. And it already has a mask already made with that selection in it. So I'll set OK. If I want it a little darker, I can change it to multiply. And the good thing about this is I can now do a Command T and change that to any amount of fall off I want to have in the image. I can have a lot of fall off or a little fall off. Hit Enter. And if I think it's too much, I can go back and remove it some. I'm going to go ahead and lower it by doing Command T. Bring it down just a little bit more. Hit OK. This gives your clients another option in how to use the image for their final use.